Hi, everyone again. My name is Iris Kyo, and I am very pleased and honored to have a chance to introduce our honorable guest speaker, Ed Royce, United States House of Representative for California's 39th Congressional District. He is the chairman of the House of Foreign Affairs Committee, representing the nation's largest and the most vibrant Korean American community. He is recognized as one of the strongest advocates for Korean American interests. In 1999, Representative Royce was appointed by the Speaker of the House to serve as the chairman of the U.S. and Republic of Korea in a parliamentary exchange. In 2004, he was an original co-sponsor of the North Korean Human Rights Act, which promoted human rights in North Korea and protection for North Korean refugees. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Representative Ed Royce.
안녕하세요. Iris, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And I would say, especially for the students here, this is an important responsibility because part of the mission, part of the task for the National Unification Advisory Council is to meet with the diaspora, the Korean diaspora around the world, and get input about what should be done in terms of the relationships between North Korea and South Korea. What can be done to advance the interests of humanity, humanitarian concerns, in order to try to make it possible, not just for Korea to be reunited, but make it possible for people to have better opportunity, a better life, the freedoms that so often we hear about. I can tell you, I've been going to Korea since '96, for 20 years. And for 10 of those years, as chairman of the Interparliamentary Exchange, I've had the opportunity to work with our friends in the National Assembly. Because I have been involved in these issues for so long, I have many friends here. Paul and I have known each other for 25 years, but many of us in this room have worked on these issues of strengthening the relationship with South Korea and worrying about what we can do to help the circumstances for North Koreans. I will tell you that I've had the opportunity to talk to many who have fled into China and ultimately became citizens of South Korea or here of the United States. And when you're on the peninsula and you're talking to individuals who are sharing their personal stories, their personal tragedies, you realize why the entire international community should be engaged in helping bring attention to this. When you're talking to a young girl who tells you that it was her brother who took the point or advanced before the rest of the family and was captured, and then by firing squad was killed, you begin to recognize the enormity of the tragedy for these families. For these 30,000 that are in South Korea today, each one has a story of what drove them to this. And per my conversation with the head of propaganda, the minister, Wang Yap, I think is how you say his name. He had defected. He passed away now. But I was the first, myself and one of my colleagues, to have an opportunity in South Korea to talk with him. And later he came here to the United States to tell us about the situation. I have listened to the academics in China who have explained to me the circumstances in North Korea, their study of how when the North Korean leader becomes angry, it is not just the parents who are taken to the concentration camp, it's the grandparents, it's the children. It's 3 generations. And one of the things they shared with me was that when the uncle of Kim Jong-un was suspected of talking with Beijing, not only was he killed, but on that side of the family, 3 generations were killed. Imagine that kind of society. And I must say, I have seen that same view of the tragedy. Maybe it wasn't as great, but it was of the same type of totalitarian impact. In 1985, I was on an exchange program. And part of that program was in West Germany, and part of it was in East Germany. And in East Germany, 31 years ago, I listened to these stories as I would be out at a restaurant, or I would be talking with people in Dresden or East Berlin, and they would be telling me their personal tragedies. One told me that it was her brother who had talked to a close friend about trying to escape over the wall to the west in East Germany. And as a result of that, her parents lost their job. She lost her job. Luckily, because Canadian Protestants were coming through, she was able to translate to English to German for them, so she had a way to sustain herself. But she said everyone in the family were now without any hope. I listened carefully to the words of Counsel General Lee, and I must say, I once had an opportunity myself to go into North Korea. I went in with a delegation from South Korea, and they asked me and another member of Congress if I wanted to go with them. And I witnessed the same thing that you did on your trip. The malnourishment, but also the attitude. Because with our delegation, with Tom Sheehy, who's my staff director, there was also Young Kim. Young Kim is now in the State Assembly, but back then she was helping me with Asia policy. And I remember very vividly a North Korean colonel and how monstrously and how violently he argued with her, the accusations against her. And it's a little reminder, as the same kind of reminder I'd seen in East Germany. When I was leaving East Germany, you know, some of the East Germans told us, well, maybe if, they told my delegation on the exchange program, maybe if you just put us in the luggage, you could get us over the border. We were on that border. The East German guards let the German shepherds loose on the luggage. Snarling, those dogs tried to find any evidence of any human trying to escape. It's just a little reminder of what a totalitarian society looks like. Now, I have seen one thing that I think was effective when I was in East Germany. And that was not the broadcasting from West Germany to East Germany. It was a different kind of broadcasting. It was the broadcasting of young East Germans who had escaped. And when they were broadcasting, they had an incredible authenticity with the young people that I was interacting with. And they would go home to listen to those broadcasts, making a platform for refugees or those who escape to talk about the issues of what are really going on inside the country and really going on in the rest of the world, because now they've seen it. This is a way that moved the attitudes over a period of years in East Germany. They moved those attitudes from maybe 2/3 in opposition to the regime to 87%. And friends, when things get to 87%, it can create a real change. And now there's something new in North Korea, which you all know about. But the South Korea DVDs, which we watch on television, in Latin America they watch these, all over the world they're very popular. But think for a minute about how popular they are in North Korea. That is the insight into what is going on in Seoul, what is going on in terms of the lives, the dramas that are playing out. And just as music and entertainment and stories had that impact in East Germany, this is slowly having the impact in North Korea. Now, I think Vice Chairman Yu is right. It is a difficult situation that we're dealing with respect to North Korea, because it has been a longer period of time. And it's certainly true that there are a number of neighboring states that don't want to see reunification of Korea. But the same situation existed with East Germany and West Germany. Russia didn't want to see the reunification, but to a certain extent, I must say, the United Kingdom was very ambivalent about a reunified Germany based upon their history. So was France. The French had a joke. West Germany and East Germany have agreed upon a new capital, Paris. Anyway, there were challenges to overcome. But I agree with his presentation in the sense that just as it was the German people that had to drive this, it will be the Korean people who will have to drive it. And once the decision is made, once enough information, I believe, is achieved inside North Korea, that attitudes change. And I will tell you a few insights, because I, some years ago, passed legislation for broadcasting, and then we turned that broadcasting over to Koreans, especially defectors, to the broadcasting. But I remember a report that came across my desk, and it was from the ministry in North Korea. It was about a debate in the Politburo, and one of the spokesmen said, if you're not listening to those broadcasts from the outside world, you are like a frog in a well. You have no idea what's really going on in the world. Our goal here is to not have all of the information controlled by this dynasty, by this dynastic family, but instead find ways, whether it's the dramas, whether it's people who have fled from North Korea and have now seen what things are like, whether it's in China or in Seoul, and have that opportunity and have access to information about what's really going on in North Korea, that information put back into society, done the right way, I know can have an impact. There are a few other issues here too. One is the issue of making certain that there is a credible deterrence to aggression from North Korea. I believe that on the day, I know this, I'm chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I know my attitude about it. On the day when there is an agreement and the people of South Korea, people of Korea, ask the United States to remove our stationing of troops there, we will do that. We are there at the request of the government of South Korea. And the reason we're there is because of this long relationship going back 65 years. And the knowledge, yes, there were sacrifices on the U.S. side, 33,000 dead, 100,000 injured. And there were sacrifices on the South Korean military, 215,000. But on top of that, the sacrifice of 5 million Koreans during that period of time, and most of that, the fighting from Seoul all the way down to Busan. That memory of what happened, the fact that there was virtually nothing left but rubble after that war, left many Americans feeling we had, after finally stopping and reversing the communist attack, many felt we have this special relationship because of mutual loss. The patches, as you've seen, of the ROC forces and U.S. forces say, we go together. There is that sense of camaraderie, and that we are committed, as long as we're asked, to make certain that there is a credible deterrence. There's also a sense, because of this special relationship, in terms of providing a platform for our foreign policy with Korea. So when President Lee Myung-bak asked me to address the Congress, I carried his request to the Speaker of the House and helped set that in motion. And likewise, when President Park asked me the same question, could I address the Congress, I made that request of the Speaker. Also, of course, we worked with the Senate to make certain that that happened. And I must say, in both cases, if you watch the speeches, yes, they're powerful speeches, and so is the response of the bipartisan reaction from the members of the House and the Senate, which is enthusiastic applause and support. As the co-author of the KORUS legislation, the trade legislation, one of the things we're doing is working to strengthen this relationship, and trade between Korea and the United States is now $100 billion. So it's a $20 billion increase as a consequence of that bill. When Korea asked for NATO +3, I put a bill in for that position for Korea. So, what I'm showing you is that I think this relationship between the United States and Korea is on much more equal footing than it was generations ago. But I also think that the important work that you have on this advisory council of working with the diaspora here in order to get input on the feelings and the observations, and then take that back to the policymakers in Seoul, that is a very important function. I don't want to go on speaking too long because I'd like to just give the audience a chance to tell me or the other members here, the advisory council, what their feelings are, what their questions are. So why don't we open for any questions or observations?
Are you ready to take some questions at this time?
Absolutely.
Okay. I know he has said many things, and I know it's really hard to summarize. So I know that he has said similar things that when our ambassador, general counsel, went to Korea 10 times, he has witnessed similar things. There's brutality, there's authoritarian dictatorship, and also famine. Witnessed similar things. And that we as Korean immigrants throughout the world, what are our roles, what we must do, what we need to do, and also involve and also speak with our politicians in Korea to make some policies. Also witness how East and West Germans and they really broadcast from individual, which was really convincing. We changed a lot of the residents' attitude. And so that may be something that we can also look at. And they said these things that if you don't listen to this broadcast, it's like living in your well. It's like throwing in a well. So oh, I'm sorry, I'm saying this in English.
Well, that's all right. Thank you for reiterating those points. They were all important points. But why don't we open it up at this time for questions? And we'll translate the question.
질문을 지금은 받겠다고 말씀하시는데요. Okay, we have a plan. So we're going to have you and our guest speakers sit.
All right.
So guest speakers, our executive vice chairman, Dr. Yu, and our House Representative, Royce. So, first before we begin the Q&A, let's give a round of applause for their wonderful, so meaningful. We have learned a great deal. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and knowledge. I know you have many questions, but we actually had people that had previously turned in questions. So we'll have those 차세대 members to ask questions first. 질의응답 시간에는 저희 차세대 분들께서 벌써 질문을 벌써 받은 게 있기 때문에 그렇게 받고 그다음에 계신 분들에서 받겠습니다. Then we'll take some questions from the audience. So we have 차세대 right over here. Are you our John Kim? Okay, please John Kim.
Before I begin, I would like to once again thank our distinguished guests for taking the time to come and speak to us today. My name is Sean Kim, and I'm a third-year student at American University in Washington, D.C., studying political science and marketing. My question is, what do you think the U.S. policy is towards the relations between China and North Korea?
Our policy is to try to convince China to assist in having North Korea cease belligerent behavior. And we have ongoing discussions with the foreign minister from China, with the Premier Li, with the head of state, President Xi, about what could be done. But as I explained, the academics in China that my delegation talked to explained that it's rather de minimis, the amount of influence that China has. The only real influence China has is in withholding some of the hard currency. And that hard currency inevitably ends up in the weapons program. This is what the former Minister of Propaganda told me. And so when China curtails that, as they've recently done, they supported the United Nations action, as you know. That's in order to send the message and also withhold hard currency so that there's less resources. And the other point I would make is that the Minister of Propaganda informed me that when they get their hands on hard currency, it all goes into either the weapons program or into the support for those immediately around the family so that they can live very well. And I asked him, well, is it spent out in the rural areas? No, he said, that's not a priority for this regime. The priority for the regime is just the support for the family, the friends of the family, and the weapons programs. So that is where we're pushing China. And I'll add one other issue, and that is the pressure we put on Beijing to treat the refugees from North Korea properly under the UNHCR, under the United Nations ruling on humanitarian support for refugees. And we always bring this up when we're in Beijing with the government, and we have passed resolutions. I've passed resolutions on this, and these are our two primary objectives.
Thank you.
We have a question number 2.
Hi, my
my name is Iris Kyo, and I'm a student member of UCLA. What is U.S. position on the human rights in North Korea?
Well, Iris, our position is one of support for universal human rights. And our position is the same as the other countries in the United Nations who supported the UN Commission on Human Rights. There was a select committee and investigation, and the conclusion was that the lack of freedom in North Korea, especially in the prison camps, shocked the conscience of humanity. That was the wording. Shocked the conscience of humanity. There is no freedom, there's no religious freedom. Obviously there's no freedom of assembly. But in these camps, there isn't even the freedom to smile. It is very, very disturbing that the situation just never gets better. And so this is why the United Nations had this special inquiry. Our position is that universal rights should be recognized. Everyone should have the right to freedom of religion and the right to be free.
I study political science in UCLA, and actually I want to ask a question for Dr. Yu. I know you already mentioned about that, like deployment of that, but I hope you can elaborate about those issues so we fully understand.
사드 배치에 대해서 혹시 더 자세하게 설명해 주실 수 있으면 감사하겠습니다.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think SAD is a kind of necessary measures for South Korea and South Korean government to defend or deter against provocation or threat from North Korea. And therefore, regardless of Chinese and Russians' opposition to such kind of decision, I think Korea and US and Japan will cooperate to set up such kind of issue in a very defensive measures. And I think we should continue to persuade Chinese government as well as Chinese people that South Korean government decision is not to target against Chinese. And if it is not easy for us to fully persuade, explain the reality to Chinese government at this moment, but if we continue to cooperate with the U.S., then I think Chinese will finally accept such a kind of, they reluctantly accept the reality, but I think it will take time. So we need patience, and we need such kind of cooperation with the international community. That SAD is a purely defensive measure. And once North Korea decide to give up their nuclear development program and missile development program, then it is not necessary for us to set those kind of SAD on the Korea Peninsula.
Thank you, Harrison. Thank you. Then we have Ho Jun Kim.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your service in the United States and for having a very strong voice in Congress for the Korean American community. Actually, this summer I had the opportunity to be an intern for Congressman Charlie Rangel from New York in Washington, D.C., and his Chief of Staff, Ms. Hannah Kim, talked a lot about your dedication to Korean Americans, so thank you. In the office, I work closely with a few other interns to publicize HConRes 40 that Mr. Rangel actually sponsored, encouraging of divided Korean Americans families. As an original co-sponsor, he helped HConRes 40 pass committee, and we have gained 150 sponsors in the House. So if I may ask a question, what would it take to get HConRes 40 scheduled for a vote on the floor so that it get passed before the end of the 114th Congress? Thank you.
It's a very good question. And Hannah and I have worked very hard on this. And as a matter of fact, Charlie Rangel and I jointly introduced it. He's the lead Democrat, I'm the lead Republican. And what we're trying to do right now is to get to that magic number of 218 co-sponsors. The reason that's so important is because that sends the message to the rest of the institution. We have 435 members of the House. Wait a minute. That means there's a majority of members. So I have passed it out of my committee, and Charlie Rangel and I are now in the process of working on getting additional co-sponsors. And the advantage you've created by bringing this up today is to remind all of us here, when we get home tomorrow morning, let's call the congressional offices of our colleagues here in California or around the country. Ask them to co-sponsor the bill authored by Charlie Rangel and Ed Royce. And it's House Resolution 40. And I appreciate your good work on behalf of that legislation. By the way, you all know how that bill works. The intention is to get the United States involved also, so that there's a strategy for, we have many Korean refugees or families who came from North Korea at some point. So we want to encourage reunification of these families. We also want the inclusion of any families here in the United States in that process. So it's to get the State Department to work on that project. Thank you.
My name is Gary Park, and I'm a student currently attending Camino College. This question is for Dr. Yu. 한국말로 하겠습니다. 저희 질문은 지금 현재로서 한반도 통일을 이루기 위한 해결책과 방법과 거의 관련이 없다고 보는데요. 일단 이 질문을 받으시면 좋겠습니다. 민감하거나 부적절한 질문이 되면 양해해 주시기 바랍니다. 통일 이후의 한국에 대한 질문입니다. 한국에 대한 질문입니다. 동아시아에서 여전히 발생하고 있는 갈등과 외교 문제들, 그리고 한반도 주변 국가들이 한국에 대한 잠재적인 스위스 및 유럽 선진국식 중립과 같은 중립화 정책 제안을 결국 수락할 수 있을지 궁금합니다. 북한이 외세와 관련 없는 자주 통일을 주장하는 것으로 알고 있는데 한국이 사실상 이런 통일 후 중립화 제안을 주요 통일 목표로 내세운다면 한반도 정세에 긍정적인 영향이 있을 거라고 상상해 봅니다. 이 가능성에 대해서 한국 주변 나라들과 미국이 긍정적인 자세를 취한다면 북한의 주장이나 구실을 더욱 반박할 수 있다고 생각합니다. 이와 같은 시나리오가 동아시아 평화와 안정에 큰 이익이 될 수 있을지 알고 싶습니다. 감사합니다.
사실 영어로 질문을 주시면 더 낫지. 또 모르는 영어로 한번 해봐.
This question has I think that this question has little to do with current plans for Korean reunification, but I would like an answer. I wonder if Korea's neighboring countries of Korea would eventually approve of the Republic of Korea following reunification of the Korean Peninsula under the ROK, becoming a neutral nation state. Due to historical reasons, current tensions regarding neighboring countries and Korea's geopolitical location in East Asia, and so on. It's known that North Korea has been calling for self-reunification of the Korean Peninsula without foreign intervention. I imagine a scenario where the ROK proposes this post-reunification neutralist policy similar to that of Switzerland and other European nations as one of its main objectives for reunification, in which a case that could ultimately refute or overcome such claims and excuses from North Korea. I believe that an affirmative stance on this possibility by Korea's neighboring nations may potentially improve the stability and peace-building process in Asia.
Formula of unification by forming a neutrality. In the past, during the Cold War era, that kind of scenario, that kind of formula was talked about among some revisionists or some progressive part in and out of Korea Peninsula. However, I think it's already completed. There is absolutely no chance for us to unify or reunify under the neutrality, because, as you know, North Korea is one of the totalitarian system ruled by one man or his own group. So once you realize the reality in North Korea, I think it is not necessary for us to consider that kind of a possibility. Well, of course, China and Russia would like to see a unification on the Korean Peninsula to have a better or friendly, unified Korea to them. But it depends on Korean people. As Ambassador Lee mentioned, we observe success and failure on the Korean Peninsula over the last 7 more decades. The only difference between North and South Korea is the system. What kind of a system or what kind of policy direction that both North and South Korea had adopted made difference. So I think it is our decision to persuade our own people, international community, and want to provide some opportunity or chance for North Korean people if they had chance to open their system or to take changes or reform by themselves in North Korea. Then I think that is the kind of a peaceful procedure for us to achieve real or successful unification. So neutrality it might consider as one kind of option, but in reality, I think it is almost impossible to think about that kind of a scenario. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we may take some other questions from the audience. Jin 박사님.
Let's give a big hand to Dr. Yu and Ed Royce. We are very, very fortunate we had Dr. Yu here and Ed Royce here at the same time. This shows how much respect that Korean government has toward Ed Royce for all the things he did for Korea. I understand when Dr. Yu reported to President Park Geun-hye said, you go over there to hear Ed Royce. That's why he's here. So I want you to know one thing. In the history of US and Korea, we never had great friend like Ed Royce. I want you to read the introduction that we have here. Every line is about his work with the Korean American community in Korea. So whenever he goes to Korea, he gets to see President Park Geun-hye. You know, President Park Geun-hye, he doesn't see just anybody. So Ed, I want you to know that President Park Geun-hye think you hung the moon. So we are grateful, and we want Ed Royce to continue to support Korea. I want to make sure he discussed, but I want to make sure I repeat this, because this is the wishes of Korean American Comfort members. One, we want to make sure that U.S. continually support U.S. troops to remain in Korea, to keep Kim Jong-un from invading South Korea. So we hope that you will remember that and encourage U.S. congressmen to continue to do so. Second thing is, as you mentioned, your bill to have Korean American senior citizens to visit their loved ones in Korea, 이산가족 상봉. We have 100,000 Korean Americans who has their loved ones in North Korea. And we hope that whenever they volunteer to go, that you will continually support us. I'm sure when our reporters report this on television and newspaper and radio, we're going to get a lot of questions. They want to visit their loved ones in North Korea. So we want to make sure that Korean Americans, we all over the country, support your HR 40. And Mr. Rim is going to send a letter to all the presidents of Pyeongtaek, and Mr. Kim is going to send a letter to all the Korean associations throughout the country. After they receive that, they will be supportive. Once again, thank you and God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Jin. I thought that was a pleasant, but thank you for your commentary and summary as well. Thank you. We'll take maybe a final question from 차세대 members and guests, and then we'll turn over to our other Pyeongtaek members. 차세대, any members have any open questions? And thank you. Then at this time, we're going to have other.
저 다음에 우리 평통 우리 위원님 중에서 질문이 계시면 손 들어주십시오. 우리 유문근 우리 위원님 나와주십시오.
저는 국제공과위원회 소속 박문규입니다. 우선 먼저 좀 쇼킹한 질문인지 몰라서 한국말로 먼저 유호열 수석 부의장님께 말씀드리고 똑같은 것 영어로 로이스 위원님께 말씀드리겠습니다. 저는 요즘 그 사드 문제도 있고 그래가지고 워싱턴 포스트랑 뉴욕 타임즈를 때가 나면은 자주 관심을 가지고 읽고 있습니다. 그런데 최근에 한번 거기서 관심을 가진 것 중에 하나가 어떻게 될 건가를 묻는 게 하나가 있었습니다. 앞으로 3개월 미국에서도 새 대통령이 이나규레이션 하게 됩니다. 그러는데 지금 현재 대한민국 리퍼블릭 코리아는 사드 배치하기로 결정을 했습니다. 거기에 대해서 중국은 아주 스트롱리 오포즈를 하고 있습니다. 아시다시피 중국은 국경을 북한하고 같이 일부는 갖고 있기 때문에 그것도 문제가 되어질 거고요. 우리 코리안 정부가 절대 상국에 대해서 그걸 조정하고 그러지는 않고 온리 북한을 통해서만 포커스를 하고 있다고 그래도 믿지 않습니다. In fact, 사실 아시다시피 얼마 전에는 미국하고 저펜하고 코리아가 중국의 힘을 받아가지고 유엔에서 북한에 대한 타이트 생선을 시작해서 어느 정도 효과는 보고 있습니다만은 사드가 배치되어지게 되면은 중국하고 자꾸 사이가 벌어질지 모릅니다. 저희 원 질문은 my main concern is if North Korea wouldn't listen and would start keep testing nuclear and long range rocket test. Just in case, my main concern is if North Korea got success in nuclear test, and I am afraid U.S. may abandon or put aside or give up Republic of Korea and acknowledge North Korea as nuclear possession, nuclear possession country. And if so, United States will have diplomatic relations with North Korea and abandon, give up South Korea. Maybe that it can be in 3 months later with a new president. So I'd like to ask 수석 부의장님 and Mr. Edwards, U.S. representative and the chairman of the Foreign Affairs, I'd like to ask, I'm sorry to, but what do you think of this? American newspaper mentioned this. Maybe South Korea will have much concerns about this. So I'd like to ask,
Yes.
would you please tell each one by one, please?
If I might,
Thank you.
If I might begin. And the microphone here. I'll use this microphone. The first observation I would make is that these laws are in fact passed by Congress. So the legislation that reflects our support for South Korea, it reflects the bipartisan support we have in Congress for South Korea. I would ask you to think about this. In terms of these issues, the issue in terms of the conflict over how we viewed the comfort women, that resolution, authored by Mr. Honda and myself, passed unanimously. In terms of the question, and I'm going to the issue of our support for South Korea, in terms of the question of Tokdo Island, when that issue came up and our little-known Bureau of Geographic Names reacted to lobbying and changed the name of Tokdo Island, I stood shoulder to shoulder with the ambassador from South Korea and worked to get the State Department to reverse that. And when the Kono statement was called into question, again with the ambassador from South Korea, I gave our U.S. position. Under our system, every spending bill originates in the House of Representatives. We pass those bills into the Senate. Those bills, once passed into law, is the U.S. position. And our position is to support South Korea because South Korea is based on the values of democracy, respect for the rule of law, and human rights. And in addition, we are very aware of our father's contributions and those of the contributions of the Korean community towards keeping the peace all of these years. In terms of our efforts, it will not just be the United States that will work towards trying to make certain that we control the conduct, the very confrontational conduct of North Korea, but every state, every government has a similar concern about this conduct. Every government, Beijing as well. And so it is in no one's interest to have this continue in a way that empowers Kim Jong-un. The last thing we want to do is to empower him. Regardless of the steps that are taken, you saw the vote in the United Nations, in the Security Council, and you saw unanimous support to try to rein in his conduct. So I think we have to be focused on what we can continue to do to cut off the hard currency, which is the resource he needs to continue to build out his program. And we're doing that, and the entire international community is doing that. But again, when it comes to South Korea, we go together.
네, 저도 에드로이스 의원님하고 전적으로 동감하고요. 미국이 북한 핵 보유를 인정할 가능성이 뭐 아주 없다라고 얘기하기는 어렵지만 저는 그 가능성은 매우 낮다. 미국이 일단 북한 핵 보유 국가를 인정하는 순간 한국에 대한 핵우산, 한국에 대한 동맹, 한국에 대한 동맹은 전 세계에 대한 미국의 동맹 의지나 현실과도 직결되기 때문에 미국이 그렇게 북한 현실을 인정하면서 한국을 포기한다. 저는 그럴 가능성 매우 낮다고 보고요. 또 그런 과정에서 중국이 또 러시아가 한반도의 영향력을 계속 유지하기 위해서 북한에 어떻게 보면 우호적인 입장을 갖는다 하더라도 북한 핵을 인정하는 그런 근본적인 지금과는 근본적으로 다른 정책을 취할 가능성도 저는 그렇게 높지 않다. 그러니까 우리가 북한 이 핵 개발에 대해서 국제사회와 공동으로 가하고 있는 제재 그리고 이 부분에 대해서 중국의 지속적인 그런 동참을 우리가 포기할 이유는 없고 그것이 사드 배치로 인해서 중국과 러시아가 불만을 표시하고 거기에 대한 일종의 시위를 한다 하더라도 그것이 북한 핵을 용인하는 그런 방향으로까지 비화되지는 않을 것이고 그러한 문제를 사전에 우리 내부에서 그럴 수도 있다라고 하는 여론이 조성되면 바로 그것이 중국이 이용해서 자국의 이익을 극대화하려는 그런 환경을 마련해 주는 것이기 때문에 우리로서는 침착하게 이 상황을 지켜보는 것이 중요하지 시작되지도 않은 중국의 어떤 보복 조치라든지 또 그것이 가져올 어떤 파장에 대해서 우리 스스로 내부 분열하는 것은 가장 바람직하지 않은 그런 상황이다. 북한이 핵을 보유하는 것을 절대로 용납하지 않을 뿐만 아니라 주변 국가들과 또 유엔 안보리와 우리가 함께 한다면 북한 핵을 폐기 못할 이유가 없다라고 하는 그런 확신을 가지고 접근하는 것이 저는 더 중요하다고 생각합니다.
We actually have a question from the audience for our House Representative Royce from kbctv station Simon Bay. Report has a question. We, United States, why isn't United States opening up a relationship with North Korea? Would there be an open communication?
Kim Jong-un and our government and other governments, there's all types of back channel attempts at communication. The real question of opening up communication is how to open up the communication with the people of North Korea. And in that sense, this is what I explained earlier when I was in East Germany. What I saw was that with radio broadcasts, and now, from what I hear from defectors, with the popularity of these DVDs that come over the border from China, there's the chance for the outside world to have a discussion with the Hermit Kingdom. There's a chance for the outside world to actually dialogue in a way, in a new way, with the people inside North Korea so that they can learn the truth. And I think that's the key question right there. If everyone in the country were educated about the situation inside the country and around the globe, then the workers' paradise isn't a paradise anymore once they realize what the situation is like in South Korea, or in China, or anywhere else on the planet. And this is very important.
Thank you so much for your time and answering our questions. Thank you for wonderful. Let's give our two speakers another round of applause.
Thank you.